And we're actually killing. Oh, man, I can't do it. All right. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Show for Monday. It's Veterans Day, everybody. First of all, shout out to all the veterans who are out there, the families of veterans. You made this country great. We don't have anything without you. And we love America because of your efforts. Anthony, any words about Veterans Day?
No, I feel the same way. Military is very close to me and my family. So, my thoughts to everybody out there who served.
Yeah. So again, thank you to all veterans and everybody associated with veterans. We can't say it enough. All right. In this video, we'll give you the top waiver wire players to target going into week 10, along with our top reactions to week 9. I'm Jim Coventry, joined by Anthony Cervino of RotoWire. All right, Anthony, let's go with some players here. And you know what? For whatever reason, I didn't copy and paste properly. So I'm going to do my wide receivers and tight ends first. Then we're going to circle back, and then we'll do the quarterbacks and the running backs. A little bit out of order today. Not a good clerical morning for me. Wide receivers. Look, we got to put Marquez Valdes-Scantling first because he caught 3 targets, all of them, for 109 yards and 2 scores against the Falcons. We know Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's played at Aaron Rodgers. He's played with Patrick Mahomes. I think he even had a cup of tea with Josh Allen. And we know they're an occasional game here and there. And he puts up this big game yesterday, and I know the Saints want to throw deep. And I know they're decimated at receiver, and he's probably going to play a lot. And he probably should be the number 1 wide receiver at waivers. But again, the ultimate boom bust guy. Anthony, anything on Marquez Valdes-Scantling?
Yeah, I've been a perennial MVS guy, and it was always following the quarterback, right? Like you just mentioned all the guys he's played with. Mahomes, Josh Allen this year, Aaron Rodgers, and it has never worked out. He pops this week with Derek Carr. He's in the role that fits his skill set. He only had 3 targets, but he obviously made the most out of them. The schedule's not bad, especially this upcoming week against Cleveland, coming out of it against the Rams. Like, if you're desperate, I would throw him in there because that big play role in that offense is significant.
It definitely is. And look, Derek Carr, for all his faults, they're chucking it deep. So there definitely is that. So, yeah. All right, let's move on. Kayshon Boutte, I bring him up frequently, but look, the usage is through the roof. He's playing over 95% of the snaps in recent games, targeted at least 6 times in each of the last 3 games. He has a game with 46 and a game with 47 yards, so it's not been anything great, but he's developing a chemistry with Drake May. Maybe by the time the fantasy playoff comes, maybe this guy's getting 50 yards a game. It's possible. Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of young guys in this offense. I think we saw Polk score yesterday. Demario Douglas, had a solid game. It's just a matter of pick your poison. Who's going to be the guy this week? I don't mind adding Boutte. He seems to be number 2 right now in the pecking order. He's now seen 6 targets in 3 straight games and at least 46 yards in 2 of them.
Yeah. So next, Mike Williams of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He barely played. He just got traded for. They brought him over. 1 target, 32-yard game-winning touchdown reception. Now, here's the thing. I think he quickly takes a starting role across from George Pickens. Yeah. And here's the thing. Mike Williams is a deep threat. Well, so is George Pickens. Defenses are obviously going to worry about George Pickens. Russell Wilson can't do a lot of things, but he could throw a moon ball downfield. And if he's going to have 2 paired receivers running deep, Mike Williams is going to have some games going forward. He's not going to be predictable for a floor play, but he is going to have some games. Anthony?
Yeah, I like Mike Williams. His skill set fits in this offense. And this offense right now is humming since Russell Wilson is taking over. If you look at the schedule down the stretch, they're going to get Baltimore twice. They get Cleveland twice. And I believe they get Cincinnati twice. This is a really nice rest of season schedule. You got Philly in there, which is probably going to be a shootout. I love Mike Williams. If you need a wide receiver, we just talked about MVS, I feel like you'll get a little bit more stability with Mike Williams.
I mean, this Pittsburgh offense, basically what we're seeing right now, it's run the ball and chuck it deep. That's their plan. Russell Wilson, I mean, for NFL, he was terrible yesterday. For fantasy, he was great. 3 touchdown passes. George Pickens made that crazy catch over a defender, which we know he can do. But it works. It works for them. So I love it. Devon Vele of the Broncos is next. At least 3 targets in the last 5 games. It's not a lot. Double-digit PPR points twice in the 5 games. Deep league player. He can play. He's good in this. He's good in the slot. But again, there's not going to be a lot of volume here. But again, deep leagues, you might need somebody. Anthony.
Yeah, he seems to be, outside of Cortland Sutton, the more consistent contributor in this offense. They also have Troy Franklin. It's just a matter of when are we going to use him? Yesterday it was a tough matchup. I didn't even want to use Cortland Sutton. He ends up doing well. So as Bo Nix gets better, maybe he distributes the football a little bit more. So I don't mind, again, somebody like Vele stashing him on a bench.
Next, Adonai Mitchell of the Indianapolis Colts. So Michael Pittman's out. Mitchell plays a full-time role, puts up 71 yards against a tough Bills defense. Joe Flacco makes his own fortune, throws 3 picks, but that means you got to throw more when you have the ball. Fantasy, we kind of love those guys. Remember the good old Jameis Winston days. But look, Michael Pittman was rumored a few weeks ago to be a candidate for injured reserve. He has multiple injuries. Right now, I'm not sure how the team's feeling about their playoff chances. There's not a crazy world where they don't shut down Pittman for a while. I'm not saying they will. He might play every game the rest of the way. But if he doesn't, Mitchell moves into a role. Anthony?
Yeah, and Mitchell is a good player. I know he saw extended time early this year when Downs was out, but that's not his natural position in the slot. Filling in for Mitchell or filling in for Pittman, I think we could see is somewhat of an ascension from Adonai Mitchell. Pittman dealing with back and finger injuries. So this is a player we definitely want to stash. And you're right. They could, in reality, shut down Michael Pittman.
It could happen. Again, we're not predicting it will happen, but he has been banged up for a while now. All right, the last one. This is a deep league stash, and that's the end of it. Jermaine Burton. He's played 41% of the snaps in the 2 games he was active. Remember, he was supposed to be a big part of the Week 9 game, but then he blew off team meeting or walkthrough, and then he got deactivated. And he didn't do much against Baltimore. 1 catch for 11 yards, I believe. But we saw he was a deep threat. Now, when T. Higgins comes back, there's a chance that Burton could pass Andre Yoshibas. I know Yoshibas, had the great camp, but he really hasn't done a lot when he's on the field, and they need to stretch the field. And that would open up everything for everybody else. So it's possible if you stash Burton, it's possible by the fantasy playoffs, he could do something. He might be a complete 0 too. So again, it's just a dart throw. Anthony?
Yeah, this is obviously a prolific offense. As long as Joe Burrow is healthy, this offense is going to hum, and I want pieces of it stashed. Fantasy playoff-wise, Denver, Tennessee, Cleveland, or Dallas, Tennessee, Cleveland, Denver. Some nice spots in there. And plus, as good as some of these defenses are, it is hard to stop Joe Burrow at times. So, yeah, get a piece of this offense. And you mentioned T. Higgins coming back. He can also exit with injury again, with his injury volatility. So if Burton starts coming on, he could be a contributor.
All right, and again, as I said earlier, because of my clerical error, we ended up doing wide receivers first because on my show sheet I put them in the wrong order. We're going to get back on track here, and we are to go to the quarterback position. Then we'll work our way through this. So now to quarterback. We mentioned Flacco a moment ago when we talked about Adonai Mitchell. 3 interceptions. We said that earlier. But he has to throw for 272 and 2 touchdowns. So he has quarterback 2 and streaming value because there are games he'll do well. And there are games he'll create his own fortune. Anthony?
Yeah, I do see a world. Do you see Joe Flacco hanging on to this job moving forward if he continues to make these mistakes? Because if he's going to make these mistakes, so can Anthony Richardson. And then all of a sudden, Anthony Richardson, hey, let's get this guy. If he's going to go through his bumps, he's going to go through his bumps. So, yeah, add Flacco now. But I do see a world if Flacco continues to struggle and they continue to lose, it makes no sense keeping Joe Flacco under center.
No, you're right. Once the season is out of control, which is getting close to that point, you're right. At some point, it's going to be like, well, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Mac Jones, I get it. He's terrible, but unimpressive against the Vikings. Now, the Vikings were a tough defense, and they were going to throw confusing looks, and it was never going to be a good output. And he only threw for 111 yards. He rushed for a touchdown. But if you're in a 2 quarterback leagues, all quarterbacks have value. And if there are teams that don't have quite the complicated looks the Vikings have, Mac Jones has been around a bit. He's got a few weapons. Brian Thomas Jr. is very good. Evan Ingram. So he's got some weapons. So in a 2-quarterback league, Mac Jones could at times have usefulness.
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly an upgrade over the weapons he had in New England, but it's still a bad situation. I'd feel better about, because I like Mac Jones coming out. I think in the right situation, hey, he could be Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield in a few years. But right now, 2-quarterback league, fine. Super flex, I would probably have you start if you had better skill position players in that super flex spot. But again, if you're in a 2-quarterback league, like Jim is saying, then yeah, you want to use Mac Jones. And Minnesota was a tough defense. They didn't play well. Detroit's going to be tough, but like there might be some spots, especially if Trevor Lawrence is hung up, where Mac Jones gives you better than what he gave you yesterday, which is right around 12 quarterback points.
These last two are going to be insane stashes. Trey Lance. And here's my point. Going into that Dallas game yesterday, I told everybody, I go, look, last we saw Cooper Rush. He had a good line. He had a great running game. They had a top defense, and he got the team to a 5-1 record. This team is anything but that. And I said, he doesn't have a chance here because he has no infrastructure. Well, Trey Lance does see some time. Didn't run for a ton, but that's the whole point. Trey Lance can run. And we saw Tim Tebow, and every year I reference Tim Tebow. Couldn't throw an NFL football, but he could run, and he was a fantasy factor. So if Lance at some point, the team should take a look at him. And if they do, and you're in a 2-quarterback league, he could have games where he runs, and maybe he doesn't. It's a crazy stash, Anthony.
It is crazy, and I get it. Quarterbacks could start getting hurt. We're starting to see it now. Dallas throws in Trey Lance. He did not look good as a passer whatsoever. But if he's going to run, he's going to bring a high floor. It's just a matter of, is he going to be smart enough to pull the ball down and run instead of throwing it into double coverage? And it looked like it was a pass directly to the cornerback if you watch that game.
Yeah. I think a lot of people had long tuned out by that point, Anthony Cervino. It was a disaster.
That 4:00 slate yesterday was a disaster.
The worst. It was the worst 4:00 slate in human history. 3 snooze fests. All right, last quarterback. Again, this is another wild stash. If you're in a super competitive league, you have a roster spot, 2 quarterback leagues, Tyrod Taylor. Look, Aaron Rodgers every week is going at least once into the blue medical tent. He has to be beat up way more than we know. 40 years old. There could be a point where these injuries pile up to the point where they can't put him back on the field. And if Tyrod Taylor gets on the field, I wouldn't be stunned if this offense got a jump start. You've got Devontae Adams, you've got Garrett Wilson, you've got Breece Hall. Tyrod Taylor was a fantasy 2-quarterback option with the New York Giants last year. He really would be with the Jets, Anthony.
Yeah, I like Tyrod Taylor. Coming into the season, I said, be comfortable drafting Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, because if something happens to Aaron Rodgers, you have one of the best backups, and we know he can support fantasy assets. I'm not saying it would be an upgrade for these guys if Aaron Rodgers did miss time, but I wouldn't it wouldn't be a question. Should I start Devontae? Should I start Garrett Wilson if Tyrod Taylor comes in? I don't know. I don't know if they skip a beat at this point. Is that crazy to say?
No, not at all. Not at all. Aaron Rodgers has problems right now. He is not, when teams know you're just sending a weird look at him, and he's getting the ball out quicker than he has. He's not comfortable. He is not comfortable at all when there's any level of pressure.
And he's not getting help for what it's worth. I think the benefit of Aaron Rodgers with the Jets, I know we're coming to an NFL standpoint here, their defense isn't good this year. I don't know what happened. I don't think they should have fired Saleh because that's what he did best. But when you don't give Aaron Rodgers that elite defense at this juncture of his career, I mean, that's what helped Brady in Tampa.
I'll tell you exactly what's wrong with the Jets defense, and you kind of got part way to it yourself. When they fired Saleh, that defense played their butt off for him. Yep. And as soon as he left, they were angry. I guarantee you they are still bitter about them letting go of Saleh. And I bet you they lack the motivation. You think they're NFL players. You show up, you do your job. They're human beings.
Yeah.
And they galvanized for that man. Last year, when that team was horrific, that defense showed up every single week for Robert Saleh. And believe me, the Jets are paying the price for letting him go. All they should have done was bring in somebody for the offense. That's all they had to do. Fools. All right. If you consider I'm sorry. If you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the RotoWire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and rankings. You get a free 2-day trial with no credit card needed. Just go to rotowire.com/Jim and check out all of our content. Now, remember, we already went through out of order. We went with receivers first, then we went to quarterbacks. Now we're going to do running backs and tight ends. Then we'll get on to our takes of the week. Running backs. I don't know a single soul that saw this coming, but Audric Estime handles 14 of Denver's 17 rushing attempts against the Chiefs. Now, the weird thing was he played 45% of the snaps, but it was a couple of touches for Javonte Williams, a couple of touches for Jaleel McLaughlin. Williams played like 29% of the snaps. And again, I'm watching 7 games at a time. I just very rarely saw him on the field. That 29% must have been like a hidden one. And I don't know there's a guarantee that it's Estime's job. But as of today, the only data you have is that it's his job. And I don't think he did anything special. And I don't think Javonte Williams played badly this year. I thought for what he was given, even in this 23-yard game of 6 carries, he has been good, I thought. Maybe I'm wrong, but Audric Estime was the guy here. Is he going to keep this job going forward, Anthony?
I mean, are we looking at a fact that Javonte Williams was not brought in here by Sean Payton? It's not his guy. It's the old regime. Estimate Sean Payton's guy. Is this going to be what it looks like moving forward? Because that was a season-low snaps for Javonte Williams. I think he only totaled 3 touches for 7 yards. Estimate only 3.8 yards per carry. Not great, but season-high 25 snaps, 14 for 53. Even Jaleel McLaughlin played ahead of Javonte, and you are right. Javonte, 5 of 10 games this year with double-digit PPR points, so he wasn't a total wash.
I don't think Jaleel played ahead of him. I get the snap count right here. I input him this morning. McLaughlin played 12% of the snaps. Williams played 29.
Oh,
so it was
okay.
Yeah, Williams played way more than double the amount of snaps that McLaughlin played, but they had almost the same amount of touches for what
I don't know
that's
what I'm
worth.
looking at.
No, that's all right. I always chart these things. Yeah, it's the first thing I do on Monday mornings is I chart all the snap counts and things like that. All right. And then I remember them because I type them into a document. So, yeah, I'm an idiot like that. All right, next running back. Cam Akers. Look, Aaron Jones left on a cart with a chest injury. Don't know if it's serious. Don't know what the deal here is. But I had grabbed Akers the week prior in case Jones got hurt. And as of right now, that might end up being something that works out. But right now, he's on a lot of waiver wires. So Akers, once we saw Jones leave, he was the clear lead guy as expected. Akers got the majority of touches. Ty Chandler got a few touches mixing in. So it will be like a number 1 Akers, and then Chandler will be the number 2. But in the 2 games of the Vikings, Akers has 19 carries for 84 yards, 3 catches for 16 yards. 2 Achilles injuries, but he still looks like a decent player. Anthony?
Yeah, and I only like really Akers if Aaron Jones misses time. Now, Aaron Jones did return to the game, but maybe he's slowing down a little bit because he is getting up there in age. If the Vikings are looking ahead to the playoffs, do we see some more Cam Akers action down the stretch so they can preserve Aaron Jones?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to see what happened to Aaron Jones. I hope he's okay. I hope he checks out fine. But that day after is often kind of brutal. And I know that as a former athlete, the day of, adrenaline gets you a long way. And then you wake up the next morning and you're like, oh, man, not so good. All right, Gus Edwards may have been dropped while he was an injured reserve for the Chargers, comes back and he handles 10 carries. And his role had been like slowing down a little bit before the injury, but he went right back into a role. Look, you have to view it this way. The Chargers have to realize they were overworking J.K. Dobbins. They had to give him the work, and it was a lot of work. And they're thinking playoffs. They have a good record. I think they're 6-3 if my memory serves here. So 10 carries for Edwards. I think he has 55 yards. Again, running backs with volume have usefulness in fantasy football. Gus Edwards?
Yeah, Gus had his best game statistically, 5.5 yards per carry, 10 for 55. He has not seen that many carries since week 2. He comes off of IR, and he looks really good. And this was a middle of the pack Tennessee defense. I don't mind stashing Gus Edwards. What he is, like when you use him in your fantasy lineups, you need to temper expectations. 2 reasons why: he doesn't score a lot and he needs to score to retain value. And he only has 1 target on the season. So we can't even rely on PPR upside. So if you have to use Gus, you have to use him in a spot where, hey, maybe he scores this week. And that's obviously very unpredictable.
Next one is Keaton Mitchell of the Baltimore Ravens. Look, I know that John Harbaugh has this crazy love thing going for Justice Hill, and he's had for years. Hill should have not been on the field in a lot of situations. He's been. Whatever is going on there, I can't explain it to you. But Keaton Mitchell was active, and we've seen Baltimore. They are thinking Super Bowl. They bring in Deontay Johnson. He's not going to do anything now, and he didn't do anything. But eventually they're going to get him integrated. Keaton Mitchell, if they want to get the most out of this offense, he needs to be the change of pace. You have the hammer of Henry, and then you'd bring in the explosive Keaton Mitchell, and every week he should get a little bit better. So I think he's a player you do want to get on those fantasy benches for the fantasy playoffs, because by that time we could see him get 7 to 10 touches. That's what he was getting last year, and he was doing very well on 7 to 9 touches. Anthony?
Yeah, Mitchell reminds me of like Devin Achane light with his skill set and the speed he brings to the table. And yeah, the Justice Hill thing. I remember us talking in the actual NFL playoffs. Why is he seeing so much work? And obviously, Keaton Mitchell was hurt by then. But if you are looking for a player that could potentially win you a week if he sees more time, it's Keaton Mitchell. It's just a matter of when and if he's going to see that action.
Exactly. Khalil Herbert of the Cincinnati Bengals played 2% of the snaps behind Chase Brown, but he was acquired just a couple days before the Thursday night game. I expect they brought him in because Zach Moss is done for the year. You can't let Chase Brown handle all of that work. He will wear down. I'd like them to see more work than he had last year, but I don't think we have these crazy 20-touch games going. You can't have a lot of those for him. So I think Khalil Herbert ultimately gets in at 7 to 10 touches per game, which is about what Zach Moss was getting when he was getting phased out of the offense. Thoughts on Khalil Herbert?
Yeah. Now, Herbert, I believe on his first carry, that it was a fumble, but he wasn't there, right? Like, because you need to work with your quarterback to get these handoffs down. He's not there long enough. I don't think the Bengals are going to ding him for that mistake. I think Herbert might be one of the more valuable handcuffs down the stretch, because if Chase Brown suffers an injury, it's not going to be Travion Williams. It's not going to be Milton. It's going to be Khalil Herbert as the RB1 on this team.
All right, this is scrape the barrel time. Last 2 running backs. Tank Bigsby injures an ankle, leaves the game. Who knows what the status is? But if he's going to miss time, look, they don't want to give Travis Etienne all the work. They've proven that, even though he had it yesterday. Dearness Johnson, not a good running back, but he would take on a significant role most likely. Anthony?
Yeah, definitely a stash you want to get your hands on. This offense is not in good shape right now, but I do expect some of these running backs to retain a little bit of value. And Dearness Johnson, he had a couple of games early in his career with the Browns where he showed competency, so you can do a lot worse than stashing Dearness Johnson.
And the last one, Marshawn Lloyd of the Packers could be activated from injured reserve this week. Not a guarantee. The hope would be he should be healthy. He should. He's been out a long time. He could see change of pace work behind Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs has been getting a lot of work. We know Green Bay likes to split that backfield up. There's no guarantee, though, Lloyd slides right into that second role, but my guess is he does. Anthony?
Yeah, he's somebody that I have stashed in my IR spot. I drafted him thinking that he was going to be a nice compliment to Josh Jacobs. So if he can stay healthy, and that's the biggest thing, has been the health of Rashawn Lloyd. I do think there could be a role, because we're saying what's the number 2, Emmanuel Wilson right now. He's getting some carries every game.
He definitely is. Yeah, the Packers always want to give their other running backs work, and obviously the worse you are, the less work you're going to get. But you're right, Wilson was getting work. Tight end position next. Theo Johnson of the New York Giants. In the last 2 games, total of 12 targets, averaging 44 yards. I loved him coming out of college. He was one of my better tight end options, aside from obviously the elite ones, but he was there. I thought he was a great potential receiver, good in the seam. And the Giants defense getting a little worse by the week. That run defense getting worse and worse and worse. They're going to have to throw a little more and more and more. And Theo Johnson is becoming part of this, Anthony.
Yeah, I like Theo Johnson a lot. I drafted him in Dynasty, and he's been playing ahead, I believe, of Chase Bellinger. Theo Johnson could be a thing down the stretch, and certainly for the future. I think the Giants drafted really well this offseason overall. If you need a spot start or a stash at tight end, we're seeing Theo Johnson's role grow every week.
Yeah, and Daniel Bellinger, he's had 1 game with 20% of the snaps since week this week 3. So yeah, he's not been on the field. Theo Johnson snap counts 92%, 85, 97, and 90. So he is always on the field, and that's not always the case for tight ends. That snap share is probably top 5 or 6 at the position.
Yeah.
All right. Tanner Hudson of the Cincinnati Bengals is next. And if you remember back to last year, Hudson was targeted at least 4 times in 7 games from week 9 on, and they leaned on him quite a bit. And he was good in that role. Eric All is injured and out for the season. This team loves to throw to multiple tight ends. Mike Gesicki's going to get some work, but they always have a second guy, and it was Eric All for a while. Tanner Hudson, in my mind, is a better receiver than Eric All. Also a better blocker. So he obviously was the guy on the field. But immediately, 7 targets for Tanner Hudson. I think in a PPR league, tight end premium, Hudson has some value, Anthony.
Yeah, there's some volatility here, obviously, at the position because you have Mike Gesicki here. And, he in theory was supposed to have the big game. Instead, we see Hudson because these tight ends are going to have value with T. Higgins not on the field. Do you still like Hudson, even if T. Higgins comes back, or are we going to fall back into a less of a role for the tight ends across the board on this team?
They don't like giving Gesicki snaps. I mean, other than when T. Higgins is on the field, they keep his snaps really low. I mean, Eric All was seeing 40 to 50% of the snaps, while Gesicki was seeing in the 30s. And I just think it's an automatic move in where where Hudson's kind of moving in Eric All's role, and it's more snaps than Gesicki gets. Gesicki is a slot receiver, and Hudson is, he's a slot receiver, but he can block a little bit better than Gesicki. Gesicki can't block at all. So they do like that. They'll play 3-4 tight ends in a game, but I do think that Hudson is going to see more snaps and ultimately more targets. Gesicki is very reliant on T. Higgins being out to have, a downfield role. It's a weird dynamic. It's a very weird dynamic. You and I both believe Gesicki should be seeing the work because we know the damage he can do. But again, the blocking thing, that is a thing. Dawson Knox is next. Dalton Kincaid had a knee injury, tried to come back in the game, left again. That doesn't look great for him. And Dawson Knox, look, he's not going to be a world beater. He's not going to be a tight end 1, but he's a good red zone option. If he's going to be seeing a few more targets a game, I think he has value, Anthony.
Yeah, and it's not like Dalton Kincaid. He's been getting volume, but he hasn't been living up to the hype. I think this wide receiver room without Amari Cooper, we're starting to see it take a step back. Even if Cooper comes back and everything's humming, there could be room for Dawson Knox down the stretch to retain some fantasy value because I'm not exactly sold right now on the reliability of Dalton Kincaid.
All right, before we get to our reaction section, got a couple comments in here. Someone, Pedro Resto, just asking about Kyler Murray going forward thoughts. There are weeks they haven't had to throw against the Bears. The Bears game, not his fault. They blew out the Bears so badly. He threw 20 times, didn't have to run. And I know he's had some bad games, but he's had some really, really good games as well. I think you start Murray you're not starting him over the top options, but you start him as a quarterback 1. You're going to have a couple games that fall out of that range. But I think more than not, he's probably going to help you. Anthony?
I'm sorry, you
Kyler Murray.
Oh, Kyler's starting to play really well right now. I know he got off to a bad start, but he's going to play like the player who I believe was the best value on the board for fantasy quarterbacks. And, against the Jets, he got it done every way possible. We're starting to see Marvin Harrison Jr., even in these tough matchups, he's clicking a little bit. If Kyler stays healthy, and that's been the issue for him year after year, I think he could be a league winner.
Couple more comments. This one asks, should I trade Devontae Smith for Ricky Pearsall and Bucky Irving? Look, if you need a running back, Irving is getting you double-digit PPR points every week. Pearsall, it's going to be up and down. Juwan Jennings had 11 targets. Debo's involved. Kittle's involved. McCaffrey's involved. Pearsall had the long touchdown, and that worked out really well. But the rest of the day, it wasn't a lot of greatness. But I think if you're getting Bucky Irving here, Devontae Smith has not been money every week. His targets have not been good the last 4 weeks. And if A.J. Brown's on the field, he is their alpha. I would probably be inclined to, if you need a running back, I'd be inclined to say I'd make that move. What about you, Anthony?
Yeah, I don't mind it. And we've had some consistency and high floor games out of Devonta Smith. But what I'm noticing, as we saw it yesterday against Dallas, we saw it a few weeks ago against the Giants, when Philly's blowing them out, Devonta Smith isn't really involved in a game plan.
He's not. He's not, and that's just the way it is. The follow-up in the Kyler Murray question is Murray over Daniels rest of the year, 4 points per passing touchdown. I still would probably play the matchups. We saw Daniels have 2 bad games. He played the Bears with bad ribs. But he had decent fantasy points. And I think he outscored Kyler that week. This week against Pittsburgh, I didn't think he had a chance. I thought this is the one defense, and they did what I thought they would do. They hemmed Daniels in the pocket. That's what all teams need to do. Most teams don't have the defensive discipline or the 2 great edge rushers to be able to do that. And they kept him hemmed in the pocket. He ran 3 times for 5 yards, and then the pressure really forced his hand as a passer. I don't think Daniels has many of those matchups. I still think you play the matchups here. I think it's week to week. Anthony, how do you look at it for Murray and Daniels?
You know, I was worried about Jaden Daniels in this Pittsburgh matchup because he hasn't really seen a defense that can bring what the Steelers can bring, not only in coverage, but you got to deal with TJ Watt. You got to deal with Highsmith on the other side. And they did give Jaden Daniels some fits. You're not sitting Jaden Daniels because not every defense in the NFL are going to contain you with the way the Steelers can. And I think another factor is the Steelers play Lamar Jackson twice a year. And I would say, like, if you can contain Lamar, I think you'll do a really good job containing a young version of Jaden Daniels. And I think that's what happened yesterday.
All right, let's move on to some reactions. Reaction number 1, the Lions battle and beat the Houston Texans. So this game was 23-7 Texans at the half. Jared Goff was on his way to a 5-interception game. That's crazy. Now, here's the beauty of the Lions, Anthony. This is a team that's continuing to learn how to win. Last year, we saw in the NFC Championship game, they had an insurmountable lead against the 49ers, and they lost. But playing in a game like this on the road, and I know the Texans are not the team we thought they would be, but to still come back, and they were making mistakes as they were coming back. This wasn't like they just flipped the script. Goff was still throwing the ball away in the second half multiple times. And yet, they come down and they grind out a victory. Nobody goes off here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 for 60 and a touchdown. Laporta, 3 for 66 and a touchdown. Monty, 12 for 32. Nobody goes off. But their defense does enough, make plays in the second half, and they get it done. What are your thoughts on the Lions?
The Lions are that team right now because they were in a deficit. You mentioned all the Goff interceptions. They were trailing early in the game, and yet the Lions found a way to pull out the win. Last season, they weren't able, in my opinion, from what I've seen, to climb out of these holes. And a big reason why I think they can climb out of the holes that they have Jameson Williams. They have the explosive playmakers now with Jameson and Gibbs to score at a faster rate. And I also think the Texans gave away that game. But yeah, the Lions, they are now showing us, hey, if we're trailing, we can come back and we can put points on the board fast and climb back into a football game. I don't think they could have done it last year.
The other side of the ball, Joe Mixon gets 90 scrimmage yards, had 44 on 2 catches, but this was a bad matchup. This offensive line's not good. Detroit is an outstanding run defense, and no Nico Collins. Of course, they didn't bring him back. And ultimately, there's not a lot to worry about here. Tank Dell's a nice receiver, and I thought he would do better against all the man coverage we'd see. But ultimately, they blitz a lot. They get pressure. And C.J. Stroud, we're finding out, like most quarterbacks, you need something around you. You can't just get it done with nothing. His offensive line is horrific. They're just hemorrhaging pressure. And the weapons, after Tank Dell, you're going to Robert Woods. John Mechie has a good game. Nobody saw that coming. Xavier Hutchinson, Dalton Schultz. He doesn't have any real weapons besides Tank Dell, and he's not a guy you want to run an offense around. So you give him a break here. Nico Collins should be back next week. Texans are 6-4. They're 2 games up on the Colts. They're 3-0 in the division. Houston is. They should easily win, easily in air quotes, win their division and make the playoffs of that Saturday afternoon first game. But if they get Nico Collins, Will Anderson will eventually get healthy with the ankle. Is this a team that can make any noise?
I would like to say yes, but I think we need to see Anderson and especially Nico Collins on the field. CJ Stroud, he took the NFL by surprise last year. Obviously the defensive coordinators have more film on him, but something looks off compared to what this team was last year. I don't know what it is, but something just seems off. And maybe it is the absence of Nico Collins, because he did solve a lot of issues earlier this season, especially with throwing the ball downfield.
People had to get sick of me, Anthony. I told them what their problem was in August. I told them what their problem was. They cut all 3 of their fullbacks. Last year, they ran that 21 personnel like the 49ers do, like the Dolphins did, and like the Ravens. The Ravens have a different offense, but they utilize that. And those 3 teams and the Texans last year, they ran 2 running back sets, and all 4 of those teams were the top 4 teams in the league in average depth of target, and they all had remarkable success throwing downfield. And then they bring in Stephon Diggs, and all of a sudden we're a 3 receiver offense. Well, guess what? The league just put a too high shell over you. Now you're done, and that's exactly what happened when they ran the 21 personnel. Teams could not. You can't play too high on that because teams have to respect the run. That's why the 49ers, like I said, Dolphins and Ravens have been successful. They completely took Bobby Slowick's system and threw it in the can, and they're not going back to it with no Stephon Diggs. That's their problem. That's been their problem. I don't understand how people this smart to have seen the success last year decide to go away from it because you add an old receiver, but that's just me. Anything on that?
I mean, is this now? They're not really skipping a beat when it comes to like the Joe Mixon production. So I think that's what a lot of people say. Hey, this team is not skipping a beat. Joe Mixon is having almost a career year.
It's the depth of target. It's where the safeties play. Yeah. When you have the 21 personnel, the 2 safeties aren't high. There's only 1 safety high because you got to play the run. Now they're playing. Mixon's getting production because the 2 safeties are deep. That's 1 less guy for him to run against. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was very easy. This is so easy. And then I got on the Ravens in week 1 because they threw Isaiah Likely 1 million balls and Justice Hill got like 7 passes. And I go, your season's done if you're going to do this. Patrick Ricard's butt needs to be on the field. Week 3, they figured that out and they have now definitely paid him in. But I saw that immediately. And everybody in the fantasy community is like, Isaiah Likely. Well, guess what? Their offense is going to stink if he's their top guy. And they knew it. I know John Harbaugh had to get in Todd Monken's grill after week 2 saying, done. Get that clown off the field. He's a great player, but I mean, clown in terms of like position. You get that clown position off the field and put the bull in there. Put the guy that's going to take out their linebackers. So you want that bull instead of the clown tight end. Again, Likely's not a clown. He's a great player. That has nothing to do with that, the position. Anyway, I'm done ranting on that. But that's an important one. I mean, this is football. And Anthony and I always talk about we love NFL football. We're fantasy guys as well, but that's it. And this question, do they need to get rid of Slowick? No, they need to bring their fullbacks back. Yeah. That's what they need to do. Give him his offense. It's the 49ers offense, the Shanahan offense. You can't run that with no fullbacks. Kyle Juszczyk, All right. Reaction number 2. Finally, forever took me to get her. Broncos fall short against the Chiefs. I don't know how the Chiefs do it, Anthony, but they just know how to win. In this game, we all thought it was over. I mean, the Broncos masterfully played the clock, got that completion to Cortland Sutton, set up for a 35-yard chippy to win the game. And, of course, the Chiefs blocked the field goal. And there we go, 16-14. They win. But I think here's the thing, Anthony. I knew last week that the Broncos defense would have a terrible time against the Ravens offense because the Ravens would bully them all over the field. Patrick Ricard again, bring that up. They would bully them. And that's exactly what they did. Well, the Chiefs, they're great offense, but they're not the Ravens. And they can't bully you like the Ravens. And the Broncos are able to hold up to most defenses. They sacked Mahomes 4 times, and Mahomes never takes sacks. And they were in his face a lot more than that. And they were great against the run. They balled out here. What are even in a losing effort, what did you think of the Broncos?
Denver played well. And, I like to get Bo Nix has mechanical issues, but he's playing well enough NFL quarterback to keep Denver outside of the Ravens game, to keep Denver in these football games. He's won quite a few games this year. And to go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes and have the lead, it's not Bo Nix's fault that this game was given away, by a blocked field goal. Bo Nix got him there. And this Denver team, I've said it before, if they had better skill position players, maybe they win a few more games this year. I like the future for this team, but this is more about the magic of Kansas City than Denver letting this game go.
One thing I'll point out in the start-sit show, I told people it's going to be tough, but start Cortland Sutton. I said the right corner, Jalen Watson, was out, and that was a big loss for them. And Sutton frequently lines up on the left side, which is the defensive right. And I said, Sutton will be fine here. They'll get him the ball. And, it took a while to get there, but he ended up giving you a good fantasy day. So hopefully you started Cortland Sutton, you took your 670-year touchdown and you called it a day. But yeah, I thought it was a good matchup for him, despite the Chiefs being so good against the pass. Like that, those injuries are so critical to watch and which players are out. Look, we can't say much about the Kansas City side. I wanted to point out one thing though. Another player in the start-sit show I recommended to play was DeAndre Hopkins. Somebody like, oh, of course you start Hopkins. A lot of people were worried about Patrick Surtain. I said, look, if Surtain's on him, Mahomes is going to put the ball on the screws right where it belongs. Hopkins is not dropping the ball, and Surtain is not out physicaling him. Hopkins has never been a separation guy, and he didn't have to be here. And if you took 4 for 56, was it a blow-up game? No. But on 5 targets, it was a fine 9.6 PPR points. Anything on DeAndre Hopkins?
Yeah, we saw him pop the other night against Buccaneers, had a solid game, not great. But this rapport with Patrick Mahomes, this is the real deal. And if you have DeAndre Hopkins, I don't know if it's a question. I think it's a no-brainer. You start him down the stretch.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, this was a floor game. This was the floor game. They're going to throw some. They can't run all day. They'll get Pacheco back hopefully in a couple weeks. That's their hope, because Hunt has been fine for fantasy, but the efficiency is brutal. He was washed last year, but again, if you give him volume, you give him great blocking, fantasy numbers follow, and that's been a beautiful thing. Anthony, let's go to reaction number 3. Are the 6-3 Chargers for real? They probably have a shot at making the playoffs, but here's the deal. They've beaten bad teams, but they've beaten them by a lot. They beat the Raiders by 12, the Panthers by 23, Denver, who's a good team, they beat by 7, Saints by 18, Browns by 17. Tennessee double digits yesterday with a garbage time late touchdown, which would have been 17 again. Now, what did they lose? They lost by 10 to Pittsburgh, 7 to Kansas City. It was close. And they lost by 2 points to Arizona. So they've been competitive with the really good teams. They've smoked the bad teams. The coaching has been good. The defense, with cornerbacks out there missing their top 2 corners, and that defense is well coached. They still slow down, again, mostly bad passing attacks, but they're going to get some people back. Offensively, Justin Herbert, they're finally giving him enough opportunity to air it out when he needs to. And even with receivers that we're not quite sure of how good they are, Herbert is a superstar. What do you make of this team?
I am buying in. We know what Harbaugh is as a coach. They have the personnel to win the way. They don't care about how it looks. They want to win. They want to win ugly, defense, run the ball. But I think when you see a lot of teams defense run the ball, they're usually missing the quarterback. They have the quarterback, and that's Justin Herbert, who's going to make, Ladd McConkey is nice, but these other guys, Palmer, Disley, Quentin Johnson, Justin Herbert's the type of quarterback who raises them into good players. So with this mix, if they keep getting better week after week, I do think this is a sneaky team there. I don't think they're winning the Super Bowl, but if you tell me, I think they can match up with Kansas City.
Interesting. Well, the way Kansas City's playing right now, right? The way they're playing right now, because Kansas City's keeping all these games close. Yeah. So you're right. So a team could hang with them because that's the football they're playing right now. Now, when Pacheco comes back, does it change? I don't know. Maybe. I don't know how much it moves the needle, but it might. But that's a good point, Anthony. If
this game was, it was the Chargers, Kansas City yesterday, I trust Justin Herbert and his weapons more than I trust Bo Nix and his weapons.
What I'll say is this, and I like your points. If the Chargers get in the playoffs as a wild card, it could work out where they play the Texans on that Saturday afternoon game, And yeah, I think they could beat the Texans. And I
Mm.
think so they could win a playoff game. Of
Yeah.
course, once you start talking Ravens and Bills with Amari Cooper, that's gonna be a completely different animal, which you
Yeah.
talked about in the past. We'll get to that in other weeks. And of course Kansas City. I think at that point, but yeah, I think if the schedule of the playoff shakes out right, they could win one game, and that would be a great year for them in a retool. All right, reaction number 4. This has nothing to do with the fact of the game against Dallas yesterday. It has to do with the question of how good are the Eagles right now. Last year, if you remember this, Anthony, this is a team, I was calling this out from like week 5 on last year. They kept winning and winning. I go, this team is eroding away. They're still winning. This is going to fall apart. And it eventually completely fell apart after week 10. I think they lost a whole string of games. They got wiped out in the playoffs. It's the opposite this year. The defense started out terrible. Vic Fangio's worked his magic. Some of these young players have really stepped up into these roles. This is becoming a complete defense right now. Offensively, it's a little disjointed, but Jalen Hurts has been getting better as a runner, efficient enough as a passer, and they're getting the most out of really their 3 superstars. Hurts, Barkley, and A.J. Brown. Devontae Smith, the targets have been on and off. He's obviously a very good player, but they don't use him enough. And then Dallas Goedert comes back and scores a touchdown. How good is this team right now in the NFC picture?
I think they're a dark horse because, you have national media and it's all Nick Sirianni. Should they fire him? Shouldn't they fire him? Meanwhile, like if you actually dissect this team in the offseason, new OC, new DC, and these aren't just first timers. Vic Fangio, very good, been around a while. Kellen Moore, very good, been around a while. Young defense. I expected this to be a slow start. And if this Eagles team managed to tread water out worse until midseason when this defense got back, they were going to be a very good team down the stretch. I think this team could be a great team down the stretch. Like when you have A.J. Brown, Saquon, you don't need A.J. Brown, solid game, not spectacular. Saquon Barkley, you didn't even know he was playing yesterday half the time, but Jalen Hurts accounts for 3 touchdowns. One day you're going to have, we've seen Saquon go for 3 touchdowns, or it's going to be a A.J. Brown game, or you have Devontae Smith. There's so much they can throw at you, and the most dangerous part is the defense. The defense is what makes this team dangerous now. Not the offense, the defense.
And they will eventually get left tackle Jordan Mailata out. He's missed the last few games, and that's going to be that's a huge boost when they get him back. Pedro had asked about our schedule of shows. We do recommend if you're on RotoWire Fantasy Football YouTube, there's multiple channels this is on. If you go with that notifications button, we do a lot of recorded content that gets edited. So a lot of it's there, and that's not on particular schedule. Anthony and I are on this show every Monday at this time. Wednesday, I do a show with Joe Bartle. That show is normally at 11 Eastern. This week, I'm going to go to the RotoWire office. That'll be a little later. Sunday, I do a start-sit show here. Anthony does a lot of short videos. I do short videos. We do them together. So that notifications button, I really think that's probably the way to go because you'll catch all that content from the RotoWire channel. Anthony, real quick, let's do it. We have to reaction number 5 here. We've got to go with that Ravens-Bengals thriller from Thursday. I know it's a while ago, but that was a big game, and we haven't had really talk about it. Again, the Bengals, they showed up well. Let's talk about them first. They lost. That's fine. They went for the 2-point conversion at the end. Thought that was smart. You needed to do that. They ended up missing it. They lose the game. 2 penalties on that play didn't get called. It's been the NFL this year. I'm not going to harp about penalties. But Joe Burrow, 428 and 4 touches. Now, we know Baltimore doesn't have a good defense. And that's going to maybe be their fatal flaw. But Chase Brown, 94 combined yards, touchdown, does great. Jamar Chase, that's the one. He's running through defenses. So this is not him beating 2 high shells. This is him running through defenses for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. Talk about Burrow and Chase for a moment.
I feel like it's been a few years because when they made that Super Bowl run, Burrow and Chase, we saw something special, and it's always been special. But this year in particular, I think they're a next level. A big part of it is that they're both healthy. It's terrible to say, but terrible to see that this team is probably not even going to make the playoffs with this special connection that we are seeing. This could be a career year for both of these players. And Part of me wishes they would make the playoffs because I think this is a special team. They've already beaten Kansas City, but I just don't think that they're there. At the front office, the ownership is a big reason why I don't know if we ever see the peak of what things could be with this offense and this football team as a whole. They had very good defense a few years ago. They let a lot of those pieces go, and that is hurting this Bengals team now.
I would recommend that fantasy managers make a trade offer and try to acquire T. Higgins. He's missed 3 games, so you've got to get through a few. He should come back because they didn't put him on IR. So the expectation was he wouldn't miss 4 games. So it sounds like he could come back. But here's the thing. When Higgins was playing, the first game that he played, it was a ramp-up game. 10 targets and 60 yards in week 4. 14 targets, 83 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 5. 7 targets and 77 yards. And then in the last game he played, it was 8 targets, 82 yards and a touchdown. T. Higgins was playing at an elite level, and he was getting more targets than Jamar Chase. Because of the missed time twice, fantasy manager may be really frustrated. Make an offer and see if you can pry away T. Higgins. Last thing, that Baltimore side, the Ravens were trailing this game, I believe, 21-7. It wasn't looking good. The offense, it was a divisional matchup. And I always caution people, be careful. These divisional matchups can get weird. And then when the Ravens realized they were in trouble, they literally just found a way to get it done. Tylan Wallace with that ridiculous sideline touchdown that went for like 80 yards. Nelson Aguilar scores a touchdown. Of course, we do get a touchdown from Rashad Bateman. But Lamar Jackson, 290, 4 touchdowns. He runs for 33 yards as well. Derrick Henry, second time in a row, did not have a big game against Cincinnati. If you look at Henry's yardage in that first game, it went to overtime and he broke a 50-yard run. Yeah. But the Bengals were really solid against him again. Now for fantasy, he gets it done. But Lamar Jackson, and they're not even using Deontay Johnson, 8% of the snaps. They're not even using him yet. Mark Andrews is back. How good is Lamar Jackson right now?
I mean, this guy's already won a few MVPs. He's the unquestioned MVP this year, and it's not because of his legs. Lamar Jackson, this is the best version of Lamar Jackson we've ever seen as a thrower of the football. Is it correlated with the weapons that they brought in? I mean, Bateman's been there. Zay Flowers has been there. I think what people are missing, number one, you have Derrick Henry. The defense has to game plan against you differently than last year when it was Justice Hill and Gus Edwards. And number 2, this is year 2 in Todd Monken's offense. So with it all coming together, plus the fact that you got a bad defense and you got to climb out of holes now, yeah, this is the peak Lamar Jackson.
You mentioned Todd Monken in year 2, and I said earlier in the show, I just want to repeat this. He wanted to use Isaiah Likely as a full-time player, and like I said, I know Harbaugh got in his grill. Get Ricard out there.
But he's an upgrade over Greg Roman.
What's that?
Upgrade over Greg Roman.
Oh, yeah. No. Monken's been great. But I said it wasn't until I think Harbaugh got in his grill and said, Patrick Ricard plays. And as soon as he got on the field, it's jokingly as it sounds, he's a 300-pound dude. And it changed. It's Kyle Juszczyk. It's Kyle Juszczyk. And those players, they are the unsung heroes. Yep. You don't use them for fantasy because they don't touch the ball, but it opens the whole field up. It's just an amazing dynamic. If you love NFL football, that's part of the reason hopefully you like hanging out with us, because we do talk about crazy stuff like this, but it matters. Hey, Veterans Day again. We started at the top of the show. We want to give a shout out to every veteran, family of a veteran, anybody that's affiliated with veterans, for all the wonderful service that they have done for us. We wouldn't have the lives we have if it weren't for their service to this country. We want to thank everybody out there, not just the veterans, the people who joined us today, who took time to hang with us. Means a lot. Any closing thoughts, Anthony?
No, again, happy Veterans Day to everybody. And if you have action tonight and Monday Night Football, hopefully it goes well for you.
Who do you like in the game tonight? We got a couple seconds. Who do you like tonight?
I think the Rams keep it going.
I like the over in this game. It's 48.5.
Oh, betting wise, yes, the over.
Yeah, I like the over too. And I do. I'm more inclined like you to think the Rams will win this game. Miami just, they're lacking something offensively. The play calling is not what it was, and that pass rush for the Rams has been no joke. They've got it from a lot of different sources. So I'm with you on that one. I would lean the Rams. My favorite bet is the over. And is your favorite bet the over?
My favorite bet is actually, and because touchdown odds are juiced, Kyron Williams, pairing him with Devin Achane, that's plus 165, but depending on your book, you'll get like a 30% boost. So that's my favorite bet, is pairing those two together in a 2-man touchdown parlay.
Again, thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Best of luck with the remainder of Week 10, and we'll be back with this show next Monday. Take care, everyone.